Hey everyone, welcome to Her Sound, Her Power, Her Business, a podcast that amplifies the voices of motivated women in the music industry. We explore the stories behind the success, the challenges faced, and the unique perspectives of women who are shaping the future of music. So tune in for some honest conversations, insider tips, and empowering insights from guest speakers that will inspire and form your journey in this crazy world that is the music business. On today's episode, we are joined by the wonderful Domi, who has years of experience at PRS. Domi gives us an educational insight into how royalties are identified, collected, and distributed in today's music industry. So to begin, why don't you share your journey into your role and what sparked your interest into the music industry?
I guess my interest in music came first. And when I was a teenager, I just really got into, a specific band. And it was one of those, I need to know anything and everything about them. But at the time, I didn't actually know working in the industry was really a thing. And I think I kind of started realizing it as I got older, but also where I come from, the music industry is very much still seen as a hobby rather than, an actual career that can, uh, you know, keep you paying bills for the rest of your life, really. So I kind of first started going into, going down the road of I'll get what my parents called a proper degree, something sciencey, and then I can do this fun thing that I wanted to get into once I have something to fall back on. Well, that worked for about a year when I realized that I definitely cannot pass a biochemistry exam. And I started looking into music management courses abroad. So that kind of got me into considering other options in what I actually want to do. And once I got into Solent and kind of started seeing what the industry might look like in a country where it's a bit more developed, after that, there was no question in my mind that I would kind of keep going with that until I, got myself a job in the industry.
Okay. Oh gosh, that's one hell of a research project though, trying to figure out what country you want to go to.
Yeah, I mean the bit that made it a bit more easier, I suppose, is that because English was the only other language I spoke, that kind of limited my options in what uni I could go for.
Yeah.
And universities in America are very famously kind of unaffordable. So UK also with its own music industry and music scene was kind of the next logical option.
Okay. I mean, have you always been interested in the legal aspect, or kind of what sector of the music industry attracted you most to start with?
Not at all, actually. So when we had something contracts focused part of our course, and that was completely honestly my least favorite one. And I think big part of it was probably because English being my second language, I didn't have the right vocabulary to understand everything. So I was finding that one really difficult. And I originally wanted to get into either events management or essentially something that would get me into gigs and to allow me to travel. Um, but the kind of legal slash copyright side of things kind of happened naturally as I got my first job and realized that I actually really enjoyed that part of it.
Okay. So when you first came out of university, what was your kind of experience getting a job in the industry, and was it hard? Because I know a lot of people struggle getting a job.
Yeah, I did find it incredibly difficult. And I ended up kind of sticking to working in hospitality for about a year and a half after university. And I kind of went through this whole cycle of sending a round of applications, then either not hearing back at all or getting rejections, maybe an interview here and there, but like those were very rare. which would inevitably kind of put me off looking. So I would take a break for a few months and then kind of do that whole process again until really, one of them finally stuck.
Okay. So where did you kind of get your break then? At what point in your kind of career?
So it was, I think I only had one interview with a different company prior to interviewing with PRS. Like I had a few phone chats with recruiters, but never got as far as an interview. But then I had the PRS interview, which was actually about 6 months before I actually got a job because I didn't get it the first time around. So I kind of went back to, the whole cycle of being put off and applying for more jobs. And they got back in touch about half a year later to let me know that another place opened up and they would love to have me on like a 3-month fixed term contract if I was interested. And at that point, I was like, 3-month contract is, it doesn't really give you a stable job, right? Like you can be out of a job really quickly, but it was kind of it's a step forward. Worst case scenario, I'll do 3 months, get a bit of experience, maybe get to know some people, and then I can do something with it. And thankfully that one got extended, and now we're almost 5 years later. I'm still at PRS.
Well, that's really lucky though, because that must have been quite scary to kind of begin with a bit of uncertainty, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually worked out that I started at PRS the day of the first lockdown.
Wow.
So that's definitely not a good time to
No.
to potentially find yourself without a job in 3 months.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad they kept me.
Yeah. Do you actually enjoy your job? Like, what do you enjoy most about it? Because I guess it could be I feel like PRS is quite misunderstood amongst students, especially. No one really understands what they do.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, while I was in uni, I also had absolutely no idea what PRS do because I think we cover or what PRS does is so wide. And I have definitely come across, people who have been with a company for 40 years who will still come across questions that they've never heard before. So, it's now that I understand it better, it's not at all surprising that people outside of company would not, understand all the ins and outs. But yeah, I've had a few roles within PRS so far,
Yeah.
and I enjoyed all of them. They all are kind of within the same realm of customer service, I suppose. But they all focus on either different customer base or what we call member base, or kind of slightly different skills or different skill set that they require. So it's, certainly doesn't get boring. There is always something new. There is always something new to research. You come across very new situations. And while, yes, I definitely have days where I'll just spend a day staring at a spreadsheet, and that's not a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You kind of try to make most of those days because, those days I can listen to music because I don't need to, think
Okay.
about too many things at the same time.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't, those are fairly rare. And otherwise, the stuff that I work on, although it's still within, copyright, the actual content of it changes so much that like it keeps the stuff interesting.
Absolutely. And we like that. We don't want a boring job.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, can we actually understand kind of what PRS does as a whole? So, I mean, they're commonly known as PRS, but are known as the Performing Rights Society. So, could you just explain?
Yes, I'm gonna do like a very simplified version of it because, as I say, it can get quite complex once you start digging into it.
Yeah.
But essentially, along with MCPS, our job is to track what music is being played where, negotiate the best possible licenses for our members for that music, and then once the music is used, to collect the data about it and really work out who should be getting paid for the usage and how, and making sure that the money finds its way to the songwriters and publishers.
Okay, that could be a very complicated system.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, all parts of the systems need their own specialists.
Yeah.
And it can take years and years for someone to understand it in depth enough to become one of those specialists.
Yeah, so while we were at uni, we asked a lot of students kind of what they're most misled by or don't really understand. And a common question was, do you know what the impact of digital platforms have on PRS? For example, like TikTok plays kind of count as performance royalties, or how does that all kind of play into it?
Yeah, so it's kind of from the start of like, you know, originally downloads and then streaming. Um, from my knowledge, it's always been really difficult to kind of figure out where does that fall between performing and mechanical.
Yeah,
So it's really down to whatever agreement people negotiate and what they think is best. So there is always loads of discussions with it, either internally or with the licensee. So in your example, that would be TikTok and as well as MCPS, because they would be the ones who collect the mechanical side of things. So it's really, everyone would put together their suggestion of best way to go about it, and then it would be given to someone higher up to make a decision. So it has changed quite a bit. I think if I remember correctly, downloads are more heavily weighed on like the mechanical side, whereas streaming itself is usually, from what I've seen, about 50-50 split between mechanical and performing. But that's not to say that it's not really going to change going forward if someone finds a better way to go about it.
absolutely. Thank you. Because it could just be very confusing with how it all works. So yeah,
Yeah, it
hopefully.
used to be pretty straightforward, where you will have, performing is every time you play music, mechanical is every time you essentially copy music, on a CD. But you can't really tell which one it is with streaming. So
Yeah.
that's why it's kind of like up to someone who understands it more than I do to work out, which side should we lean towards.
Absolutely, thank you. So, in your professional opinion, do you think it's worth kind of pushing the artists get a better understanding of their rights, or do you reckon they should just focus on their creation?
I would say it is really important for the artist to understand. And while I completely understand that, it might take a very different type of person to understand the business of music than to create the music itself.
Yeah,
I think all artists should have at least a certain base level of knowledge, because first of all, unless you blow up straight out of, a TikTok video, chances are you have to go through certain steps to get to a position where you can afford to have someone who will take care of it for you.
absolutely.
Um, and even a relatively small artist can make decent money, say from playing live gigs, but they will never be able to do that unless they know they have the right to it, unless we're taking the live music and PRS as an example. If the artist doesn't know that they need to let us know about what music they played, we will not know that we need to pay them.
Yeah.
So I think the base level of knowledge can be really helpful for everyone.
Yeah, because it definitely seems to be a grey area of knowledge for many musicians, or also just for a lot of music industry professionals as well. There are definitely a minority of people that get really confused by it, which is obviously understandable, and then therefore need to rely on their teams for information, and that could
Yeah,
be quite a slippery slope for some.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know that publishing, or I always found that publishing is one of the more complex
Yeah,
parts of the industry. So, that's kind of where your publisher would come in. And at the very least, they can point you in the right direction as the artist.
Absolutely. And I mean, so you said you kind of started off in COVID times. And I
Mhm.
mean, since then, I feel like TikTok, especially, and social media has almost blown up a bit wider than it did before.
I would
So,
say so, yeah.
how has that affected your job role, or is it not at all, would you say?
So I don't think me specifically, but I would imagine that it would kind of have to do with the people who actually deal with the processing of the royalties. Because from my side, the copyright is going to be the same whether you use it on BBC One or on TikTok. Like, I need someone to tell me, who owns the copyright, essentially. Um, but if more of the money is coming through the online platforms rather than what I would call the traditional sources, it does kind of shift the systems we use and the way things are processed. So I can imagine they would feel the impact a lot more than someone in my position.
Okay, and do you have an opinion on the use of AI and how that affects the music industry and potentially the way royalty payments work?
I mean, there is a lot of conversations about this currently, and it's the conversations are happening with people who understand, AI a lot more than me. I have a very vague understanding of, how AI learns and how it potentially creates music. But I don't think I know enough about it to have some sort of professional opinion. I would say my personal opinion is kind of that I would be a little suspicious of it,
Yeah.
but I can't, I don't have enough to back that up to present it as an opinion that might be worthwhile, if that makes
No,
sense.
absolutely. I mean, what is the most rewarding part of your job?
Oh, that's a good question. I
No,
think it just okay, this is gonna be really, it's potentially gonna sound really boring, right?
not
But
at
I
all.
find it really rewarding when I get contacted by a member who potentially has a really messy catalog, whether it's for a historical reason or they bought it from someone else who didn't look after it. So it's not really clear on the system what's what. And those tend to take a lot of work to, first of all, figure out why things are behind it, and then to find a better way of doing it. And these types of cases tend to, stretch across a few months. So, like, once that final request is sent, and once you can look at the catalog and see that it actually makes sense now, that is incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, no, I bet. And also, like, what do you think the key skill sets are for someone to do your role?
Um, I actually think the main one would be the ability and willingness to learn. Because,
Yeah,
as I said,
very important.
copyright was not necessarily something I wanted to get into. So I wouldn't say I really came into PRS with the right skills for copyright. But
Okay.
because it's something that I enjoyed learning about, um, you know, I and my prior roles didn't necessarily involve that much copyright work, but
Yeah.
because I was set on, this is the next step I want to take, I was willing to kind of go outside my role to learn more about it and kind of put myself in the best position to, become the best person for the job the moment the job really became available. Um, so it's not really, skills I had previously, but I think it was the ability and willingness to learn that kind of helped me get into the place where I was, chosen for the role, really.
So always thinking outside the box and trying to better yourself in every situation, no matter what role you're in. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, something like that. Or, it might not even be, kind of, oh, I found my dream job, so I need to go do whatever it takes to get that job and get the necessary skills.
Yeah.
It's really just being out of your comfort zone and dealing with something that you haven't dealt with before, because it might, push you to in the general direction of where you want to get.
Okay, thank you. So at the end of every episode, we ask all of our guests if they have one funny story that they could share to our listeners.
Um, I certainly do. One of the things that we get to do in the summer, through PRS, is collecting set lists at festivals. It's kind of a perk, but also it's still part of the job. Because our whole purpose there is that we can't, we don't know who to pay if we don't have the set list.
Absolutely.
So with like the bigger festivals, Glastonbury would be one of them.
Such a fun
We send people to like look after the stages and ask the artists for their set list, so they don't have to then send it to us themselves, and so we can kind of get the money out as quickly as possible. But it's also very much a perk because while we still have to work, we do get to, once the job is done, we get to enjoy the festival itself. And my first Glastonbury, or my only Glastonbury, I went to see someone at one of the stages, and I popped into the loos in a bag, and it's, your good old portable toilets, nothing fancy, in backstage, and a friend of mine was waiting outside, only for me to come out of the loo and realize that George Ezra was coming out of the one next to me. So since then it's become kind of a, I peed next to George Ezra kind of a story.
Oh, I've never heard that in my life. That's really good. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's you can only mention that story in a not very professional circles, but my friends find it hilarious.
Thank you so much, Domi, for coming on our podcast, and we really can't wait to follow your journey in the future. If you made it all the way to the end of this podcast episode, thank you so much for all of your support, and if you enjoy, please give us a like and subscribe for more music industry content, or get in touch in the comment section for any future music professionals you would like to see. See you next time from your girls at SMB.